Remember that Ted Cruz has gone on record as saying that he does not believe in global warming. That by itself is okay. The danger is that he will allow ideology to guide scientific policy, and that could be a dead-end disaster. That's something we have to watch very carefully to keep him honest.
The Republicans have taken full control of Congress, and with it, prominent Republican leaders will now get to sit atop the powerful committees that run America's most influential agencies. One of those Republicans, Senator Ted Cruz, has been named as chair of the Subcommittee on Space, Science, and Competitiveness, where it will be his job to oversee NASA and science programs, leaving many members of the public and at the space agency more than a little nervous. Welcome back to Midpoint. Former White House Space Program Advisor, consultant to NASA headquarters, space shuttle engineer, also author of the fascinating book Dark Winter, How the Sun is Causing a 30-Year Cold Spell. Pleasure to welcome John Casey back to the show. John, thanks so much for being here.
Ed, good to be with you.
John, let's talk specifically right about Ted Cruz up top, because it wasn't moments after this decision was made that a net site came out with 8 dumb quotes about science from new NASA overseer Ted Cruz, and they listed such things that the last 15 years, no recorded warming, contrary to all the theories that they're expounding. There should have been warming over the last 15 years. It hasn't happened. Many things like this. Wait a minute. So, bottom line, is Ted Cruz the right guy to oversee NASA?
Ted Cruz is an outstanding senator to oversee NASA, and you have to take with a grain of salt that particular article. I did read it, and it was from a heavily biased left-wing source, and they were like many who view Senator Cruz as a Tea Party favorite, always on the attack, always trying to find or twist some words to their advantage. But clearly, Senator Cruz is a very strong candidate for the space program. His stance with NASA is, in my opinion, unequivocal. He will be a great asset, and if we let him do as he says, and once again have NASA lead the way in space exploration, he will be a great subcommittee chairman.
Well, let's talk specifically then about this, because in 2013 he wanted to reduce NASA's budget. Well, wait a minute, that was the Budget Control Act, so we do understand that. But here's someone who speaks out against global warming, yet NASA is one of the key scientific agencies studying global warming and climate change. So I think even you can see that I think that's where a lot of people are coming from, that they feel as if all research will stop right here and the senator will be the one to put an end to it.
I think what they were doing was taking the top line of that news article and trying to develop that rather than read the rest of it. What was happening at that time was both a sequestration vote, which applied to all government agencies, which we desperately needed at that time, and also a pickup on some of the wasteful use of facilities that was going on within NASA. Both Senator Rubio and others were supporting turning those over to commercial space operations, which in effect implied some cutting of NASA budget. But in general, it was a misinterpretation of what was going on, not a lack of will or desire to build NASA to its former glory.
Now, the word competitiveness is in the title of the committee that he holds. All right, let's you and I talk for a moment about competitiveness when it comes down to NASA itself. What is it that Ted Cruz can do in order to make NASA competitive again? And you and I have spoken about this when, quite frankly, NASA is a shell of its former self.
Yes, it is, and that's step number one. We can't achieve great things. We can't be competitive on a global basis if we're running on a baseline budget that doesn't grow and in fact has been declining in real terms based on CPI growth. If you look at the future of NASA, it's anemic. We do have a big rocket and a Orion capsule to put on it with the Constellation program, but in effect, we're just plodding along, not making the kind of progress we wanted, not making the kind of progress we need to, given that other nations, especially China, will be back to the moon before we will. So I think Senator Cruz will attack that head on. I think he'll make us not only competitive, but a leader again in the national space worldwide. And also, I think he'll help us with the commercial space as well.
All right, now let's get back to the climate change issue, because in the New York Times, here's the headline: 2014 was the hottest year on record, surpassing 2010. They claim it underscores scientific warnings about the risks of runaway emissions and undermining claims by climate change contrarians that global warming had somehow stopped. I know that you've talked about this, you've written about this, we've discussed this. They say it was the hottest year on record, it's climate change, and everybody who says it isn't better listen up real fast. Your response?
Certainly 2014 was one of the warmest, and by one or two different climate data sets was the warmest. However, we use 4 or 5 major climate data sets. They don't always agree. In fact, the one I use the most says that 2014 was the 3rd warmest, not the 1st. However, interpretation of these last 15 years is oftentimes misconstrued as evidence of global warming, or that is clearly not the case. We still have, on average, 18 years without any effective global warming. And quite frankly, from a global cooling scientific standpoint, I am quite happy with what happened in 2013 and 2014. The very brief temperature spike we did see is a final sign, we believe, for the coming cold era that we've been predicting all along. The sun actually gives us a warming sign just before it pulls out the global temperature rug from under us.
All right, now, when you talk about global cooling, I found this interesting. There's an article out right now that discusses volcanoes being the reason for global cooling. I think people put hot lava together, but then they don't realize that what the volcanoes do spew out is a tremendous amount of cloud cover, basically blocks the sun. How am I doing so far as an amateur scientist?
Very well, thank you. The volcanic activity is a crucial factor in solar climate research, because what we have found is that we see increased volcanism and potentially record volcanic eruptions on the horizon as the new cold era continues. We will see a very dramatic drop in global temperatures beginning by the end of 2016, lasting for a full 15 years until we get to the bottom of the new cold era around 2031. Between now and then, we will see record volcanic activity, which will make the new cold era even colder.
It is always a pleasure to have you on the show. I want to tell everybody again about the book called Dark Winter, How the Sun is Causing a 30-Year Cold Spell. It is now out in hardcover. And whether or not you believe in global warming or whether or not you think it is all just a fallacy, I recommend you read this because it has some fascinating discussions that are in there, and it will make you look at the issue in a very different sense. Dr. Casey, always a pleasure to have you on the show, my friend. Be well. We'll talk again.
Thank you, Ed.
All right, break, and we're back with the domino effect one slice of international currency will have on the American dollar and what it means for your bank account. It may not happen in America, but it will affect you. That and so much more as we continue right here on Midpoint.